Welcome to the Korean Boss and Black Queen channel. This channel will bring you powerful love stories between Korean men and Black women, filled with passion, tension, forbidden attraction, tender moments, and even dark sides. Enjoy listening. Please subscribe to the channel to hear more great stories. I married a man whose family could kill me, and the day after our wedding, he looked at me like I was already gone. My name is Tasha Williams, and I have never been the kind of woman who bows her head for anyone. I grew up working double shifts, fighting for every inch of respect I got. So when Kang Min-jae walked into my life with his quiet intensity and dangerous calm, I did not fall for his money or his name. I fell for the way he looked at me, like I was the only real thing in a world built on lies. Everyone warned me. They said his family was not just powerful, they were untouchable. They said women like me do not survive in families like his. I thought love would be enough to prove them wrong. I was wrong. The wedding itself felt like a funeral dressed in silk. His mother did not smile once. His relatives whispered in Korean, not even bothering to lower their voices, as if I was invisible or already beneath them. One of his uncles raised a glass and called me a temporary mistake. Nobody laughed, but nobody defended me either. Not even Min-jae. He stood beside me, expression carved in stone, his hand barely touching mine, as if even that small connection was too dangerous to show. I told myself he was nervous. I told myself he would come back to me once we were alone. He never did. That night, he did not reach for me. The next morning, he barely spoke. Days turned into a cold routine where I existed in the same house as my husband, but felt like a stranger renting space in his life. He stopped looking at me the way he used to. He stopped laughing. He stopped being mine. And the worst part was not the silence. It was how normal everyone else acted. The staff avoided my eyes. The cameras in the house followed my every move. Doors that were once open were suddenly locked. My bank access was quietly restricted. It was subtle, calculated, suffocating. I started to feel like I was being erased piece by piece. When I tried to confront him, he would just stare past me and say I was overthinking. That word, overthinking, like my instincts were a flaw instead of a warning. I began to question myself. Was I not enough for him after all? Was I just a rebellion he regretted the moment it became real? Some nights, I would lie awake next to him, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, wondering how someone could feel so close and so unreachable at the same time. I told myself I could fight for us. I told myself I would not let his family win. But deep down, a quieter voice kept asking a question I was too afraid to answer. If your husband turns into a stranger overnight, do you hold on tighter, or do you walk away before you disappear completely? The war did not begin with shouting or threats. It began with silence, so precise it felt rehearsed. The morning after I realized Min-jae was no longer mine, I noticed the first change. My credit card declined at a cafe I had visited 100 times before. The barista gave me an awkward smile, and I laughed it off like it was nothing, but my hands were shaking when I checked my account. Restricted. Not empty. Not closed. Just restricted. Like someone wanted me to know I still had access, just not control. When I got home, the staff who used to greet me avoided my eyes. One of them bowed slightly and walked past me like I was a guest who had overstayed her welcome. The house felt the same, but the air was different. Thicker. Watching. That was when I noticed the cameras. They had always been there, but now I could feel them. Every hallway. Every corner. Red lights blinking softly like a heartbeat that did not belong to me. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was imagining things, that stress was getting to me. But then the small accident started. My car stalled in the middle of an intersection, the brakes responding a second too late, just enough to send a spike of fear through my chest. The mechanic said it was nothing serious, just wear and tear. But I knew that car. It had never failed me before. 2 nights later, I slipped in the kitchen. Water on the floor, clear and almost invisible. My head missed the marble counter by inches. When I looked up, one of the maids was standing in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide, but she did not move to help me. She just watched. I started sleeping with the lights on after that. Every shadow felt like it was breathing. Every sound made my pulse jump. And through all of it, Min-jae stayed exactly the same. Calm, distant, untouchable. The strange part was that he always appeared at the right moment. When my car failed, he was there within minutes, pulling me out of the driver's seat with a grip that was firm but careful. When I fell in the kitchen, he was suddenly behind me, lifting me to my feet, checking for injuries without saying a word. It should have comforted me. It should have made me feel safe. Instead, it made everything worse. Because how could he always be there and yet never explain anything? I started watching him the way I felt the house watching me. I noticed how he spoke less around his family, how his jaw tightened when his mother entered the room, how his phone buzzed constantly with messages he never let me see. One evening, I walked into the dining room and found them all gathered without me. His mother sat at the head of the table, elegant and cold, her fingers wrapped around a glass of wine like she was holding a weapon. She looked up at me and smiled, but it was the kind of smile that cuts instead of warms. She asked if I was enjoying my stay. Not my home, my stay. I felt something in my chest crack. Min-jae did not correct her. He did not even look at me. That night, I confronted him. I asked him what was happening, why everything felt like it was closing in on me. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable, then said I was overthinking again. Overthinking. That word hit harder each time. It turned my fear into something small, something dismissible. It made me question my own instincts. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was turning normal family tension into something darker. But then they brought her. A woman dressed in soft elegance. Everything I was not. She sat beside Min-jae at dinner like she belonged there, like I was the outsider. His aunt introduced her as someone suitable. Suitable. The word echoed in my head long after dinner ended. I watched the way his family looked at her, approving, calculating, already rewriting the narrative of his life without me in it. I felt invisible sitting right there. That was the night something inside me shifted from confusion to fear. Real fear. Because this was not just rejection. This was replacement. But then they brought her. A woman dressed in soft elegance. Everything I was not. She sat beside Min-jae at dinner like she belonged there, like I was the outsider. His aunt introduced her as someone suitable. Suitable. The word echoed in my head long after dinner ended. I watched the way his family looked at her, approving, calculating, already rewriting the narrative of his life without me in it. I felt invisible sitting right there. That was the night something inside me shifted from confusion to fear. Real fear. Because this was not just rejection. This was replacement. Days later, I found myself standing in the hallway outside his father's study. The door was slightly open, voices slipping through the gap. I did not mean to listen, but my feet would not move. I heard my name. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. His uncle's voice, low and certain, said that as long as I stayed, I was a liability. His mother replied that mistakes needed to be corrected before they spread. There was a pause, heavy and deliberate, and then someone said it clearly, without hesitation. If she stays, she dies. The words did not sound emotional. They sounded practical, like a business decision. My heart slammed against my ribs, so hard I thought they would hear it. I stepped back slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run, but my body felt frozen in place. I wanted to believe I misunderstood. That it was a metaphor. That they meant destroying my reputation, pushing me out, anything but what it sounded like. But deep down, I knew this was not a family that dealt in metaphors. This was a family that removed problems permanently. That night, I lay in bed beside Min-jae, staring at the ceiling, replaying those words over and over until they lost all meaning and became something worse. Reality. He lay next to me, close enough for me to feel his warmth, but there was an ocean between us. I turned my head slightly, watching the outline of his face in the dark, searching for any sign that he knew, that he cared, that he would stop this. He did not move. He did not speak. And in that silence, something terrifying settled into my bones. I thought they were trying to break me emotionally. I thought they wanted me gone. I was wrong. Daniel Reyes did not enter my life like a hero. He appeared quietly, like someone who had been watching long before I ever noticed him. The first time I saw him, I was sitting alone in a cafe 2 blocks away from the house I no longer trusted, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold while my thoughts spiraled into something sharp and restless. I felt exposed everywhere I went, like invisible eyes followed me even outside those walls. When he sat across from me without asking, I almost stood up to leave. But then he said my name. Not loudly, not aggressively, just enough to make my heart skip. I froze. He did not smile. He did not try to charm me. He simply looked at me like I was a person, not a problem to be managed. That alone felt unfamiliar enough to keep me in my seat. He introduced himself as Daniel Reyes, a name that meant nothing to me at the time, but there was a weight behind it I could not quite place. He asked if I felt safe. No one had asked me that in weeks. I opened my mouth to lie, but nothing came out. Instead, I asked him how he knew me. He leaned back slightly, his expression calm but focused, and said something that made my stomach drop. In your world, people like me always know when something is about to break. I should have walked away. Every instinct told me this man was dangerous in a different way. But danger had already become my normal, and at least his version of it came with honesty. Over the next few days, he kept appearing never too close, never too far, always at the exact moment I felt like I was about to unravel. He did not push. He listened. When I spoke, he did not interrupt or dismiss me. He did not tell me I was overthinking. He did not look through me like I was already gone. He saw me, and that simple difference began to pull me toward him in ways I did not want to admit. One afternoon, when the weight of everything became too much, I told him pieces of the truth. Not all of it, just enough to test him. I told him about the house, the silence, the way my life was shrinking around me. He listened without reacting, then said something that changed everything. You are not being ignored. You are being erased. The words settled into my chest like something solid and undeniable. Erased. Not abandoned. Not forgotten. Removed. Suddenly, every moment, every glance, every silence made sense in a way that terrified me more than confusion ever had. I asked him what I should do. He did not hesitate. You leave before they finish what they started. It sounded simple when he said it, but nothing about my life was simple anymore. Because leaving meant walking away from the man I still loved, even if he no longer felt like mine. It meant admitting that everything I believed about us might have been a lie. I told myself I was just using Daniel as a way to think clearly, as a way to survive. But the truth was more complicated than that. He made me feel seen. He made me feel steady. And after weeks of feeling like I was disappearing, that kind of presence felt dangerously close to comfort. Meanwhile, Min-jae remained exactly the same. Cold. Controlled. Untouchable. If anything, he grew more distant as days passed, like he was slowly removing himself from my life piece by piece. The gap between us widened until it felt impossible to cross. I tried one last time. I stood in front of him in our bedroom, my hands shaking, my voice unsteady but determined. I asked him if he ever loved me. Not past tense. Not future. Present. He did not answer right away. He just looked at me with that same unreadable expression, and in that silence, something inside me broke. Because love should not feel like this. Love should not feel like talking to a wall. Finally, he said nothing. And that nothing was louder than any answer he could have given. I laughed, but it came out hollow, sharp at the edges. I told him he did not love me, that he was too much of a coward to admit it, too afraid of his family to choose me. The words spilled out faster than I could stop them, fueled by weeks of fear and confusion and pain. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He just stood there, absorbing everything like it meant nothing. That hurt more than anything else. That night, I packed a bag. Not everything. Just enough. Enough to leave without looking back. As I walked out of that house, no one stopped me. Not the staff. Not the cameras. Not even him. The silence followed me all the way to the street, pressing against my back like a warning I refused to hear. Daniel was waiting. Of course he was. He opened the car door without a word, and for a moment I hesitated. Because stepping into that car meant crossing a line I could not uncross. It meant choosing something unknown over something that had already started to destroy me. I took a breath and got in. The door closed with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. As the car pulled away, I did not look back. I told myself I was finally free. I told myself I was choosing myself for the first time. But deep down, beneath the relief and the fear and the fragile sense of control, something felt wrong. Like I had just stepped out of one danger and into another I did not fully understand. That was the night everything started bleeding. I should have known freedom would not come that easily. The moment Daniel's car turned onto a quieter street, something in my chest tightened, sharp and instinctive, like my body was trying to warn me before my mind could catch up. The city lights blurred past the window, but I could not shake the feeling that I had not escaped anything. I had just changed directions inside the same storm. Daniel drove in silence, one hand steady on the wheel, the other resting loosely near the gear shift. He did not look at me, did not ask if I was all right, and for the first time since meeting him, that calm felt different. Colder. Calculated. I told myself I was being paranoid again, that fear had rewired my instincts, but the thought would not leave. Where are we going? My voice sounded smaller than I expected. He answered without hesitation. Somewhere safe. The word safe no longer meant anything to me. I turned toward him, studying his profile, searching for the same warmth I thought I had seen before. It was gone. Or maybe it had never been there. Before I could ask another question, headlights flashed behind us. Too close, too fast. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened, just slightly, but I saw it. Then everything happened at once. A sharp turn, tires screaming against the pavement. My body slammed against the door as the car swerved into a narrow side street. My heart pounded so violently, it felt like it might tear through my ribs. What is happening? I asked, but I already knew. This was not random. This was not coincidence. This was a hunt. The car behind us did not slow down. It followed. Relentless. Precise. Daniel cursed under his breath, something in Spanish I did not understand, and pushed the car harder. The engine roared, the city dissolving into streaks of light and shadow. I grabbed onto the seat, my fingers digging into the leather, every nerve in my body screaming. Then a second set of headlights appeared ahead, blocking the street. My breath caught. Trap. We were being boxed in. Daniel slammed the brakes, the car skidding to a violent stop. For a split second, everything went silent. Then the doors opened. Not ours. Theirs. Men stepped out, shadows with purpose, moving with the kind of coordination that does not come from improvisation. I felt it then, deep in my bones. This was not about fear anymore. This was about survival. Daniel reached for something under his seat, his movement sharp and practiced, but before he could act, another car tore into the street from the opposite direction. Faster. Louder. More aggressive. It did not slow down. It crashed straight into the vehicle blocking our path, metal screaming, glass exploding into the air like shattered light. Everything froze for a heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Gunshots cracked through the night, sharp and deafening. I flinched, my hands flying to my ears, my entire body shrinking into itself as the world around me turned violent and real in a way I had never experienced before. And then I saw him, Min Jae. He moved through the chaos like it belonged to him, precise and controlled, his presence cutting through everything like a blade. His eyes found mine for a fraction of a second, and in that look, something shattered inside me. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. He was not distant. He was not indifferent. He was in the middle of this. Always had been. He reached the car in seconds, yanked the door open, and pulled me out with a force that left no room for hesitation. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice low and steady, nothing like the silence he had given me for weeks. I stumbled as he moved, his body positioning itself between me and the gunfire. Every step calculated, every movement deliberate. The world blurred into noise and motion, but I stayed close, instinct overriding everything else. Daniel shouted something behind us, but I did not turn. I could not, because in that moment, I realized something that made everything else fall into place. This was never random. This was never just fear. This was war. We reached another car, its engine already running. Min-jae pushed me inside, then turned back briefly, his eyes scanning the street, calculating, assessing. For a second, our eyes met again, and this time, I saw it clearly. Not distance, not coldness, fear. Not for himself, for me. The realization hit harder than anything else that night. He got into the car, slammed the door, and sped away before I could say a word. The city rushed past us again, but this time, everything felt different. The silence between us was no longer empty. It was heavy, filled with things unsaid and truths I was only beginning to understand. I turned toward him, my voice trembling despite everything I was trying to hold together. "Tell me what is happening." He did not answer right away. His hands tightened on the wheel, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. Then finally he spoke. "They were not trying to scare you. They were trying to remove you." The words settled into the space between us like something final. I felt the air leave my lungs. Remove me, not push me away, not isolate me, eliminate me. I stared at him, my mind racing, piecing together everything I had seen, everything I had felt, everything I had dismissed. "You knew," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to stay steady. He nodded once, a small, controlled movement that somehow hurt more than any denial could have. I waited for anger to rise, for accusations to spill out, but what came instead was something heavier. Understanding. Twisted. Painful. Unavoidable. "That is why you pushed me away," I whispered. He did not look at me, but I saw the tension in his expression, the way his grip tightened just slightly on the wheel. "If you stayed close to me," he said quietly, "they would not hesitate. Distance was the only thing keeping you alive." The words cut deeper than anything else he had said, because suddenly everything made sense. The silence, the coldness, the way he had erased himself from my life piece by piece. It was never rejection. It was protection. And I had mistaken it for abandonment. I felt something inside me crack under the weight of that realization. Weeks of anger, hurt, confusion, all collapsing into something raw and overwhelming. But before I could process it, another thought surfaced, sharper than the rest. Daniel. I turned toward Min-jae, my pulse spiking again. "Who is Daniel?" For the first time since this started, Min-jae hesitated, just for a second. Then he said something that made my stomach drop all over again. "He is not trying to save you. He is trying to use you." The car filled with silence once more, but this time it was different. Heavier. Darker. Because I finally understood the truth I had been standing in the middle of all along. I was never choosing between two men. I was standing between two wars. The night the empire fell did not feel loud at first. It felt quiet, like the moment before a storm finally breaks something that has been holding too long. I stood beside Min-jae in a room filled with people who once looked at me like I did not belong, and for the first time, I was not the one being watched. I was the one they were afraid of. The meeting was supposed to be routine, another gathering of power and control where decisions were made behind closed doors and lives were reduced to numbers. But this time, I walked in with something they had never accounted for. Proof. Not emotion. Not desperation. Evidence. Financial records, hidden accounts, illegal transfers that tied every single one of them to crimes they thought were buried too deep to ever surface. Daniel had wanted to use me as leverage to tear them down from the outside. What he did not expect was that I would learn the rules fast enough to beat him at his own game. When the files appeared on the screen, the room shifted. Conversation stopped. Eyes sharpened. The illusion of control cracked. Min-jae did not speak at first. He did not need to. His presence alone was enough to hold the room still, But when he finally stepped forward, it was not as a son or an heir. It was as something else entirely. Someone who had already chosen which side of the war he was on. His mother tried to maintain her composure, her voice steady as she questioned the legitimacy of the information, but I saw it in her eyes. Fear. Real fear. Not of losing power, of losing everything. Because this was not a threat. It was an ending. Daniel's move came faster than expected. Armed men forced their way into the building, chaos erupting as alliances shattered in seconds. But this time, I was not caught in the middle without control. I had already made my move. Law enforcement did not arrive by chance. They were called. Every exit was covered. Every escape cut off. The empire that once felt untouchable collapsed in real time, not through bullets, but through exposure. Arrests happened fast. Brutal. Final. Men who once controlled entire networks were dragged out like they were nothing. And in the middle of it all, I stood still, watching it unfold, feeling something strange settle inside me. Not fear. Not relief. Something closer to clarity. Daniel was taken too, his expression no longer calm, no longer controlled. For the first time, he looked exactly what he was. Someone who had underestimated me. When it was over, when the noise faded and the room emptied, all that was left was silence and the weight of everything that had just changed. Min-jae stood beside me, closer than he had been in weeks, but this time, the distance between us was gone. I turned to him, searching his face, trying to understand what we were now after everything that had happened. He looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time since our wedding, there was no barrier in his expression. "I loved you enough to let you hate me," he said quietly. The words settled deep, heavier than anything else he could have given me. Because now I understood. Love, in his world, was never soft. It was never safe. It was sacrifice. It was distance. It was choosing pain if it meant survival. I exhaled slowly, the tension I had carried for weeks finally breaking, and for the first time, I did not feel like I was disappearing. I felt like I had stepped into something real, something dangerous, but something honest. The empire was gone. The war was over. But the question stayed with me, sharper than ever. If love is something that can cost you your life, is it still love? Or is it just another battlefield you were never meant to survive? I used to think love meant being chosen, protected, and held close no matter what. But now I understand something far more complicated. Love in the wrong world does not look gentle. It looks like distance. It looks like silence. It looks like someone breaking your heart just to keep it beating. I survived a war I did not even know I was part of, and in the end, I had to decide who I was going to become in a world that tried to erase me. So tell me this, if you were in my place, would you forgive him, or would you walk away and never look back? If this story made you feel something, do not forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know what you would have done.